Hey everyone! Did you know that if you jump back about 20 years, almost 0% of the world's largest companies publish sustainability reports? But today, that number is well over 90%. It's wild. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack exactly how modern companies measure their true impact. See, for a long time, the business world had a really narrow field of vision. Success was pretty much defined exclusively by traditional profit margins, but as you probably know, the landscape has shifted dramatically. Today, we're expanding our view way beyond the balance sheet to look at a company's complete footprint on the world. Let's dive in.
We've got a fantastic, incredibly comprehensive journey ahead of us today. We'll start with Corpsemal Report Liminal Evrimi, or the evolution of corporate reporting. Then we'll get into integrated reporting, unpack the 6 capital model, examine environmental and social footprints, and finally wrap up with the management systems and standards that keep it all together.
All right, Section 1, Kurumsal Raporlamanın Evrimi, the evolution of corporate reporting.
Think about it. Traditionally, corporate reporting basically meant just one thing, churning out legal financial statements. But today, accountability has evolved into this massive, interconnected ecosystem. It's like a giant puzzle. Reporting to your stakeholders is no longer this isolated, siloed task. It is intricately linked to integrated reporting, it has to capture complex social and environmental effects, and the whole shebang is underpinned by internal management systems. It's a totally different ballgame now.
To really wrap our heads around this push for transparency, let's look at Apple's Supplier Code of Conduct. Apple strictly demands that its suppliers transparently disclose their working conditions and environmental practices without any falsification. Now, here's the kicker. A supplier might not actually be legally mandated by their local government to report this data. But if they want to do business with a massive giant like Apple, this level of detailed disclosure becomes an absolute non-negotiable requirement.
Moving right along to Section 2, Integrate Rapporthalma Nadir, or what is integrated reporting?
So how do we actually get past the glaring limitations of pure financial data? The answer is integrated reporting, or IR. Now listen, this isn't just about printing a green initiative flyer and stapling it to the back of an annual financial report. Not at all. It requires what we call integrated thinking. This is a management team's ability to actively monitor and communicate the full complexity of how their organization creates value over the short, medium, and long term. It blends financial and non-financial data into one holistic, living view of the company's true sustainability. Let's look at a concrete example to make this real. Take Transnet, a massive public company down in South Africa. They use an integrated report to brilliantly illustrate how their corporate mandate, their business model, and their overarching strategy respond directly to their stakeholders and the environment around them. They don't just show you their profits, they actually demonstrate how they create sustainable value for the economy, society, and the environment all at the same time. And this matters directly to you and me. Because when a huge national logistics company shifts its strategy to reduce emissions and uplift communities, it literally changes the air we breathe and the local economies we live in.
That brings us to Section 3, Alti Sermai Modeli, the 6 capital model.
The absolutely crucial point here is that integrated reporting relies on understanding an organization's dependence on 6 very distinct types of capital. Let's break this down completely using a theoretical company called DMG. If you just glance at their standard finances, you'd see declining gross and net profit margins. I mean, it's bad, sure, but maybe it looks recoverable. But the moment you apply the 6 capital model, the true crisis is revealed. Look at the rest of it. Their manufacturing capital is bleeding out due to a falling R&D budget. Their human capital is depleted with a 15% decrease in staff. Social capital? Tanking, with employee satisfaction dropping over 15% every single year. Their intellectual capital is literally walking out the front door with rising staff turnover. And their natural capital footprint is just getting worse, with carbon emissions up by 1/3. Depleting all 6 of these capitals leads to a severe, systemic, strategic drift, and a simple balance sheet would have completely missed the whole story.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, Çevresel ve Sosyal Ayak izi, the environmental and social footprint.
Let's expand our horizon even further and look at the actual physical marks an organization leaves on the world. We're talking about the resources they consume and the emissions they generate. To combat this footprint, companies have to actively implement highly specific, detailed mitigating strategies across all their operations. We're talking about simple but effective changes, making two-sided printing the default to save paper, using auto shutoff for electronics to save energy, setting up employee carpooling to cut down transport emissions, even just installing movement-activated taps in the bathrooms to conserve water. Every single unit of resource saved shrinks that overall footprint. But what is the absolute heaviest footprint of all? Emissions, for sure. According to the EDGAR database, if we look at 2022, global greenhouse gas emissions were heavily dominated by carbon dioxide at nearly 72%, followed by methane at 21%. Measuring these environmental footprints isn't easy. It requires incredibly precise tracking across massive industrial operations just to see if these corporate mitigating strategies are actually moving the needle on a global scale. Okay, so that's the environment. But what about the human side? When assessing their social footprint, businesses lean heavily on the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. Adopted back in 2015, these are not just some corporate jargon. They are an objective, global blueprint used to measure impacts on crucial issues, things like ending poverty, reducing inequality, and improving health. Now, a single company isn't expected to tackle all 17 goals. Instead, they focus on the ones most relevant to their specific industry and geographical location. Let's anchor this in reality with another great example. Consider a hypothetical chocolate company called Sweetco. They need to conduct a social impact assessment specifically regarding the risk of child labor in their supply chain. To do this neutrally and objectively, they use 4 key measures. First, they review if the prices they pay for cocoa actually allow for fair living wages. Second, they measure the child labor rates in the farming region. Third, and this is clever, they track local school attendance rates as a corroborating metric, because hey, if the kids are in school, they aren't working in the fields. And finally, they monitor if overall household incomes can actually support those families. This is exactly how you objectively assess and mitigate a social footprint.
All of those specific metrics we just talked about, they feed directly into what is known as the triple bottom line. Instead of obsessing over just one bottom line, modern organizations have to weigh 3. You have economic indicators, like gross operating surplus. You have social indicators, like health and safety records. And you have environmental indicators, like carbon footprint and water use. It is a foundational framework for weighing the complex trade-offs between profit, people, and the planet.
Finally, we zoom back in for Section 5, Unitim Systemleriva Standards, Management Systems and Standards.
Listen, you absolutely cannot manage a massive global environmental or social footprint on a simple spreadsheet. It's just not going to happen. You need a formal management system. And every formal standard out there is built on 4 relentless, systematic steps: plan, do, check, and review or act. It's a continuous loop, perfectly designed to ensure constant, measurable improvement. This exact plan, do, check, act cycle is literally the heartbeat of ISO 14001. This is a globally recognized process standard that requires an organization to constantly measure the environmental performance of all its activities and then use this cycle to continually improve that performance. Doing this effectively ultimately drives down costs and massively enhances their public reputation.
Now, if we look over at Europe, we see something called EMAS, the Eco Management and Audit Scheme. This one follows an even more rigorous flow. It starts with an initial environmental review, cycles through that management system, and crucially, it flows down into an independently verified environmental statement that actually must be registered and released to the public. So, when you put them side by side, a really clear distinction emerges. ISO 14001 is global, sure, but it relies on voluntary compliance checking without any central registry. EMAS, on the other hand, is often assigned a lot more credibility by stakeholders. Why? Because it enforces strict public disclosure and requires mandatory, independent verifiers to actually check for legal compliance with environmental laws. With EMAS, if you aren't compliant, you simply don't get validated. End of story.
Well, we have covered a ton of ground in this explainer today, from the nuances of the 6 capitals down to incredibly strict audit frameworks. But before we go, I want to leave you with a real-world dilemma drawn directly from our sources. Think about a Scottish timber company. They decide to invest heavily in sustainable replanting, health and safety, and environmental compliance. Because of these incredibly responsible practices, the price of their timber naturally goes up. Meanwhile, they're competing against imported timber that was harvested with cheaper labor and far fewer environmental protections, which makes those imported goods much cheaper for the consumer. It leaves us with a vital, really complex question to ponder. As corporate horizons expand, who should ultimately bear the burden of social and environmental responsibility? Is it the company trying to do the right thing, the consumer paying at the register, or the government regulating the market? I really want you to think about that the next time you look at a product's price tag. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the true cost of value.